Thank you for joining me. For those of you I don't know, my name is Will Critchlow. I'm founder and CEO here at Searchpilot. And today we're talking about making SEO a performance channel for e-commerce. So I'm going to get straight into it. Those of you who don't know me might not know that I have a long background in SEO specifically. So it might surprise you to hear that my opinion is that actually SEO is not always hard done by compared to paid search, in the sense that most retailers, most e-commerce players probably should spend more on paid search than on SEO. We'll talk a little bit about why that is. But the scale is quite hard to imagine sometimes. So I've got a chart here of Google's annual ad revenue, and it is quite spectacular. This is, almost $250 billion in ad revenue, which is just a stunningly hard figure to imagine. And what is wild about this is you can layer on a massive SEO company revenue and barely see it. It is there. It's that pink line at the top of the right-hand chart. And so what I'm saying is not that we shouldn't spend more on paid search than on organic search. I'm just saying maybe it is slightly out of whack. Maybe it's not that we should spend quite that much more. In order to redress the balance just ever so slightly, it's on us. It's on SEO. It's on an organic search channel to make a better case, understand our channel better, have better answers to the questions like, what benefit will we get from incremental investment and spend in the channel? And that's what I want to talk about today. So as I said, my name is Will Critchlow. I'm founder and CEO here at Searchpilot. We help really large websites run SEO experimentation programs. We help improve the value of their organic SEO program. And if you want to talk more about that, there'll be some links at the end. We're not going to belabor it, but we work with some really cool brands. Some that we can talk about include Petco, who folks in the US will have heard of, and Marks and Spencer, who Brits will definitely have heard of, and maybe has some visibility in the US as well. But anyway, more on that later. The title of the talk is Making SEO a Performance Channel for E-commerce. But what does that even mean? What is a performance channel? Well, the way I'm thinking about it is a lot of it is to do with how it comes across to leadership. So in most e-commerce retail organizations, the SEO team is going to report either into someone with a title like head of channels, into marketing, potentially even into product. And the folks that you report to have a few things that they care about when they're thinking about their budget allocation, they're thinking about the resources they're putting into things, and they're thinking about accountability fundamentally. So they're thinking about, how is this org performing? How is this channel performing? And how is my investment performing? The first thing is they need a model for how the channel works. So they want you, if you're the SEO specialist, they want you to be able to explain how the channel works in business terms, denominated in dollars, pounds, and to talk about how the work that we're doing is driving the returns that we want. And we'll talk about how that's different to some other channels in SEO later. But fundamentally, there's a concept of being able to articulate it in a spreadsheet, essentially. There is an element of needing to be able to prove the value of the work that you're doing and of the channel as a whole. Obviously, proving the value of the channel as a whole is largely an analytics and measurement play, but proving the value of the work that you do can be trickier, as we all know in SEO. But a performance channel would have proof of the value of the channel and of the effort, activity, and optimizations that we're putting into improving it. And thirdly, really crucially, and this ties into where I started off, is there's got to be this idea that we can put more effort, more budget, more resources, more time into improving things, and that we're going to get better results out of the channel as a result. And that is that's a really key part of what we're going to be talking about today. So that's what I mean by performance channel. And you can kind of sum all of this kind of thing up with thinking, okay, supposing that someone from the finance team in your org came to you tomorrow and said, hey, we've been looking at the numbers and we've been reviewing all of the different digital channels. And actually, we're really interested. What results would we get next year if we gave SEO an extra $1 million? Do you have a good answer to that question? How confident is it? How well articulated is it? And is it in language that finance and leadership can understand? That's the kind of stuff that I want us to be collectively better at achieving. Okay, so first of all, before we get into how to do this, let's talk a little bit about the organic channel. So I probably don't need to explain to anyone on this call that organic search is huge, huge, huge. This is anonymized aggregated data, but it's real data from large e-commerce players in UK and US. And I'm not claiming it's totally representative, but it's certainly in line with what we see every time we work with major retailers. We're seeing organic search is probably their biggest channel. In the vast majority of cases, it is by far or significantly the biggest of all the channels. But there's something that's even more interesting here, which is you think about how direct and email are driven, like what causes them, what creates them. And it's very hard to cause more of those things to happen. I mean, direct is a very brand-led play. It's a lot of returning visitors. Email, kind of by definition, is returning over some time horizon, maybe not in the concept of analytics, which might have a 30-day window or something, but fundamentally, they got on the email list somehow. And so when you think about new customer acquisition, it's even more dramatic how powerful organic search is. And I'm not claiming that it's all new customer acquisition. Of course, there's brand plays in there as well. But in terms of acquiring new customers, it is kind of the behemoth. And that's probably where we're going to build a lot of our business case from. So it's huge. It's probably the biggest, possibly the biggest channel you have, certainly the biggest channel for new customer acquisition, but it isn't necessarily already a performance channel in the language of what I'm presenting here. So let's think about how to make it one. First of all, let's think about what our model is for how it works and how we might approach fleshing out a business case and explaining it in spreadsheet language, in finance language, in leadership language. So we're going to start with thinking about unbranded organic. And again, real data, this is the green is the percentage of, you'll see this in a few different charts over the next few slides. Green is the percentage of this bar, which is unbranded. And the reason I'm thinking about this is, for the most part, especially with large retailers, you're going to get your branded traffic. So there's not a ton that you can do to improve your share of voice, share of visibility for branded search. There's some stuff, and I don't want to completely rule it out, but for the most part, it's not where the big opportunities for growth are going to lie. And secondly, it's very hard for you to do anything to affect the total amount of that opportunity. That's much more a brand play, a merchandising play, a product play, and frankly, it could be above the line advertising, those kinds of things. It's not typically in the remit of the SEO team. So you can ride those, hopefully, tailwinds, and certainly you're going to suffer with those headwinds if they're there. But it's not something that you can probably improve. So when we're thinking about the business case, we're going to be thinking about the unbranded traffic, which is the competitive stuff and also the new customer acquisition stuff, because the branded is much more likely to be repeat visitors. Unbranded is where we have some new opportunities. So let's think about where that traffic lands on your site. And again, we're talking today about e-commerce. So we're talking in terms of scalable site sections. There could be other elements, right? There's certainly going to be standalone pages, delivery information, returns, contacts, so on, customer services, those kind of things. One-by-one pages that are not going to be highly visible. You could well have a content section, a media section. That's not typically anywhere near the scale of the commercial opportunity that we're talking about here. So when we're thinking about where does the unbranded search land, it's overwhelmingly on the PLPs and the PDPs, the product listing pages and the product detail pages, what some folks call category pages, subcategory pages, and product pages. And as I said, the green bar shows the percentage of unbranded. And in my experience, very little unbranded traffic lands on the homepage. This was particularly some large retailers with very strong brands, so maybe it wouldn't be quite this dramatic. This is single-digit percentages, but 10%, teens of percent is certainly pretty to be expected, and hard to really move the needle on homepage performance. Whereas visibility of thousands or tens of thousands of PLPs and PDPs is much more potentially in scope. And this is, I think it's about 85% unbranded traffic landing on these PLPs that I was looking at. This is 60-something% unbranded traffic landing on individual product pages. And this is where the scalable opportunity is. This is what's happening now, but it's also where the opportunity for growth is, by getting these pages index better, by having them rank better, having them rank for more keywords, and having the click-through rate improve. So, excuse me a second. Okay, so that's why everything that we're going to be talking about here and everything that we do at SearchPilot is focused on these scalable site sections. And just to drop in a kind of random anecdote at this point, I have had a few conversations recently where I've been explicitly asking folks on the business side and finance side of these kind of organizations, how are the controls, how is the measurement, how's the reporting for organic search, but also how does it compare to paid search? And I'm very interested in making the stuff for organic as good as possible. But I'm also interested in how that compares to what folks are delivering on the paid search side, because that's kind of the bar, right? These businesses are often spending tens, hundreds of millions on paid search, and they're clearly happy to do that. And that budget is often freely flowing and forthcoming. And I've had some really interesting anecdotes come back. Multiple organizations have said to me some variation of the controls are not always there, and the overspend can be dramatic. We overspent on paid search last month by more than our entire annual SEO budget. And I think there's some frustration in some finance and leadership teams about the fact that paid can be a bit of a money pit, and it's an auction, and we know that Google is just going to take the lion's share of that, whatever happens, and they're going to have you compete against everybody else in your market and compete away your margin. And it was actually Bezos at Amazon who said, your margin is my opportunity. But it might as well have been Sundar and folks at Google saying, you guys can just go and compete over that and decide how much of your margin you're going to give to us. And it's just a race to the bottom. And so there's some frustration that actually we can't make it work better for building the assets of the organic search visibility. So let's think for a second about what do we actually mean by the budget in this context. So I've got a couple of slides that use visuals like this, which I actually stole from my brother's course, the SEO MBA, which is on pause at the moment, but a lot of the content is still visible at SEOMBA.com. So he's fleshed out this idea that this is not to scale, but in paid media, you spend the lion's share on the actual media, and then there's a bunch of other things that you're going to need to support and need to spend money on in order to get the results that you're looking for. It's a little bit more ephemeral, a bit harder to tie down exactly what we mean by SEO budget, because there's going to be some strategy work, whether that's agency or in-house, there's engineering work, there's content production, there's some creative work in there, there's obviously analytics and technology, there could even be other things not listed here, data, other tools, and so forth. And it can be hard really to know what exactly we mean by that. But I think one of the challenges is the fact that once you've done a certain amount of fixed investment in landing pages and so on, you can scale up and down paid media spend without causing knock-on effects on other engineering teams and product teams in quite the same way. Whereas a lot of SEO investment kind of does overlap and does involve all of those teams. So there's definitely some organizational challenges in there as well. A little while ago, I put out into the void, deliberately without context, this question of what is a large SEO budget? And I liked Eric's answer. This was actually not an e-commerce play. This is a startup that much more kind of location-based visibility. And this is a $1 billion ARR company. So I guess they call themselves a startup. I think probably we can call them something bigger than that now, scale up or something. And he, back of the envelope, fleshed it out as $18 million a year. And that's from a spreadsheet. I know that I've seen Eric's work behind the scenes, but this is talking fully loaded costs and people and data and tools and so forth. And it's important to remember these numbers are and should be big. You're in a competitive world. I've always liked the name of SEO of competitive webmastering. And your competitors are doing this stuff. I know people spending $500,000 a year on rank tracking. I know people spending $2.5 million a year just improving their footer links. And your competitors are doing this because that gives them an edge in these areas. And so, I often tell the story of I've been on the side of pitching budgets for many years now, almost 20 years. And I've pitched agency budgets, I've pitched tool budgets, and I've often heard kind of surprise of the size of spend that is possible, that some folks are spending on some of these things. And I'm always shocked actually in the other direction. In small companies my own company, Distilled, was only ever dozens of people, never even hundreds of people. And we were, millions in revenue, but not tens or hundreds of millions in revenue. And, we would spend tens of thousands a year on individual things, even 100,000 on running a big conference, or tens of thousands on our CRM, our marketing system, or various other things like that. And so it is kind of still mind-boggling to me that we're talking some billion-dollar companies that think that 10,000 is a big number. Company budgets are big. The other point I wanted to outline, back to the SEO MBA example, is this is actually a content business rather than an e-commerce business. Again, not exactly relevant to all the folks on the call. But the point my brother Tom was making here was that when you're making a business case, you need to compare not just to the status quo, but to the cost of doing nothing. And he highlights the fact that if we don't invest in this channel, we're actually forecasting a drop in performance over time. And I think this is an interesting thing for us all to think about. And I had this conversation the other day with a global SEO leader who was struggling with a certain element of how to make their business case. And I was coaching and was discussing, I think it would be a reasonable question to ask leadership. What do they think would happen if they didn't have an SEO team, didn't have an SEO agency, didn't have any SEO tools, did no investment in any of these things, didn't have assigned engineers, and so forth? Like, what? Just stop for a second and ask yourself, what do you think would happen? I don't have exact numbers on it, but I do think that what we would expect to see is, if not, probably an absolute decline, but certainly a decline relative to competition. It wouldn't happen overnight. It wouldn't happen automatically, and it wouldn't happen linearly. It would happen in fits and starts as things went wrong or didn't get fixed, or mistakes were made, or competitors got ahead, or algorithm updates happened, or we didn't stay ahead of the latest schema markup, whatever it might be. There would be moments when we fell behind. So it wouldn't be a kind of gradual slope, but it would gradually decline. And it would look something like a kind of depreciation of an asset, I believe. Obviously, if you stop spending on paid search, then flatline very quickly. There is a kind of finance geek conversation to be had here about the difference between capital expenditure and operating expenditure. I don't know of anybody who actually capitalizes their SEO spend, but it behaves that way in my experience. And some of this language can be useful in discussing it, that what we're talking about here in paid search is we're spending money this period to get benefit this period, right? We spend the money, we get the click. And of course, the business value can grow over time. We might get the lifetime value of a customer or whatever else it might be, but the action, the result happens right now. Whereas in the case of SEO, we've got an asset that depreciates gradually over time, like I said. So if we did nothing next month, we would still get organic search traffic, and that might depreciate over time. And that same kind of concept applies to the work that we do as well. So when we put investment into SEO, when we make a change and we try and do something good, we make a winning change. So we do something that's a good idea. It helps us get a boost in performance, but that boost also doesn't last forever. I think it's probably reasonable to assume the advantage gets competed away as competitors copy you, it gets diluted as Google makes changes, or just becomes outdated as the market shifts around you. And this is going to vary for different industries, different profiles, different businesses, different maturity of markets, and various other factors. But what it does mean is that in basically whatever market you're operating in, we can't just stack up the good ideas and say, this idea won us 8% more traffic, this one won us 12% more traffic, this one won us 10% more traffic, and just add those numbers up. And this is a very common thing that I see because we get to quantify these individual changes. So we get to run a test for an individual hypothesis and assign a business value to that. And we often have this conversation of how do you aggregate the value of multiple wins over time? And I think the first thing to say is you can't just add them together. It would be unreasonable to expect that all of those wins last forever. What I think it looks like is a little bit more gradual, a little bit more kind of compounding over time. We could get deep into the weeds of how I would go about modeling this in a spreadsheet, but that's probably not the most interesting webinar. Maybe we'll do that in detail another day. But what that kind of means as we put it all together is that it ends up looking like a cohort chart, which you might have seen in revenue depictions, and just showing the value of those cohorts, each cohort declining over time. But by stacking the cohorts, you get improved performance. And so you combine the effects of all of your efforts into some gradually improving run rate trend. And that is what would happen in if the counterfactual, if the case where you did nothing was flatline. But of course, you have to combine that effort with the fact that actually what you're doing is you're beating a gradual decline, at least relative to your competition. And there's lots of different ways of measuring this. But anyway, ultimately, you put this stuff together and you get a forecast for what you believe would happen, could happen year over year with the investment and the assumptions that you make here. And I find it's really good to make these assumptions transparent and say, this is assuming that we can make X changes, that Y% of them are a good idea, that the average improvement of a good idea is Z% or whatever. And you can, and the length of time that that's going to last for before it decays is however many months. And you can make assumptions around these things and you can build a model. And that gets you a year-over-year forecast, which is compared to where we started, where are we going to end up? But it's very important as you build the business case that you don't just stop there, because actually the point of investing is to do better than you otherwise would. So your ROI is actually compared to the counterfactual of not investing. If you invest, then this is how much better we believe we're going to do. And so that kind of puts together the model of how this stuff works. The next piece is about proving the value. And this is about proving the value of the channel as a whole, but I think more importantly, to tie into the final piece that I want to end on, which is the more budget, more results. Spoiler alert. The proof of value is not just the proof of the channel, it's more importantly the proof of the activities, the things that we do to try and improve the channel. And this is my happy place. This is where SearchPilot's energy and efforts are focused. And I'm not going to do a big deep dive into that today because we've talked about that in many places. And if you're interested in it, there's some links to what you can get. But the important thing here is that when we're doing SEO, fundamentally we have, at its most basic, 3 levers. We're either going to rank for new keywords, we're going to improve existing rankings, or we're going to influence the search results in such a way that we get better click-through rate for the rankings that we already have, or some blend of those things. And so out of any of those things, or any combination of those things, comes valid SEO hypotheses. Otherwise, it might be valid work, but it's not an SEO hypothesis. If it's not targeting improving one of these things, then it could be a user experience change, it could be things that are beneficial in other ways, but it's not an SEO hypothesis. So we take an SEO hypothesis, and what we do is we run the scalable, controlled experiment to spit out the data that tells us, well, compared to not doing this change, we expect an incremental, in this example, 3,000 sessions a day with some confidence interval. And we can say with statistical confidence that, yes, this change was a good idea. And here's the central point estimate. And here's our confidence range on that number. And that's how we think about this. You might have other approaches. If you're interested in more detail, there is, as I say, more links. But the point of this is to ultimately be able to put together a dashboard that lists the innovations, the iterations, and the initiatives, the things that we've done this year, and the immediate point impact of each of those things. So this one was a 9.2%. This one would have been a 6.4% drop, but obviously we didn't roll that one out. And we've done some other things that are inconclusive, and we can't be sure of the scale of the impact. And this dashboard is a key part of this middle pillar of a performance channel. In other words, being able to go add proof points to that model that I was talking about that says, we're going to do all these things. Some of these things are going to be positive, and although their effects may decay over time, they're valuable for the time that they're around. This is the piece that quantifies that, proves it, and puts it into understandable language that it works well for leadership. And as I say, I'm not going to get deep into how this works. If you want to know how to run SEO tests, there's this epic post from my colleague Craig Bradford on the SearchPilot website. It's very easy to find because it's feature content all over the place. So head to searchpilot.com and have an enjoyable 22-minute read of that if you want more detail. Okay, so we've talked about the model. We've talked about how we prove the value of the individual initiatives. The key part then is to say, well, can we get to this concept where we believe that by adding budget, we can get better results from the channel? And can we articulate that in a way that the leadership, finance, and business understands and believes, so that we can justify building out that thing? And how we do this, and hopefully you're here to hear our opinion on this stuff, but how we do this is to think of this in terms of an experimentation program. And an experimentation program in e-commerce, as I say, we're talking about the scalable site section. So we're talking about the category and subcategory pages, product detail pages, so PLPs, PDPs, is we're going to take ideas and we call these hypotheses. So hypothesis can come from lots of places, can come from your team, can come from other teams in the organization, could come from an agency, can come from lots of places, can come from reviewing what competitors are doing, can come from best practices, can come from market research, audience data, could come from things that we publish as example test results or things that other people have seen in similar or related markets. So you take all of those input of ideas and come up with some hypotheses and refine them into well-stated hypotheses. So, we believe that making this specific change to these specific pages is going to benefit us in organic search. We run through that through a prioritization step, because obviously, hopefully you've got a big long backlog at this stage and you want to know which ones you believe are going to be most valuable. That could be an element of effort and anticipated impact and reward. So you're combining your estimate of how hard it's going to be with your estimate of how valuable it's going to be. And then you run these experiments, and depending on the results, you have different paths through to get to ROI. Hopefully you get some winners, roll that change and get the money bags. Sometimes an idea that you would have done otherwise turns out to have been a bad idea, and you get to avoid it. And that is ROI as well. If this was an idea that everybody in the business was excited about, but unfortunately it turns out to be a bad idea, then you've actually done well there. And we've got some subtleties in the middle of the process. If you want to know more about how we build these processes, this slide and a few of the others come from another webinar series that my colleague Sam Nemza delivered around designing an effective SEO experimentation program. And as I mentioned, there's a couple of places where you can get these links. So bit.ly/effective-SEO-experimentation, bit of a mouthful. It'll be clickable in the slides that are going to be shared, or you can grab your phone and do the QR code thing and check that out just now. But anyway, a few details off that. So we like to think that it's not individual tests so much as the experimentation program. So thinking about how many tests are we running, how good are they, how well are we measuring them, and so forth. And that's because individual test results are unpredictable. If we could know without running the test whether something was a good idea or not and quantify that impact, we wouldn't need to run the test. And our existence essentially kind of boils down to the fact that different websites, different markets, different situations are in fact different. And so we can be inspired by tests we've seen in other markets and on other sites, but we do need to run that test for ourselves. So we don't know whether a test is a good idea or not, and we focus instead on the things that we can control. So the things we want to happen when we are building out an experimentation program, we want more organic traffic. We want to learn what works so that we can be even more effective in the future. And ultimately, we want the business impact. But we can't directly control any of those things. So the things that we do for managing an experimentation program are around running enough tests, keeping the quality of the tests high, and analyzing those tests in as effective a way as possible so that we can find, with the greatest statistical confidence, the winners, and be as confident as possible, even in the small uplifts. So we're managing to these variables. And what that looks like over time is tracking leading indicators. So are we on track with our number of tests? How's our win rate holding up? And incidentally, it's quite common to have win rates below 20%. I think we see about 21% across our testing program, but the target of 10 to 15 is quite common in many experimentation programs, including kind of conversion rate optimization and other channels. And we're trying to maintain these testing cadence, testing win rate, and then we'll often measure the average uplift of a winning test as well. That speaks to the hypothesis, the quality of the hypothesis, along with the win rate, and combined with the test sensitivity, so the capability of the statistical platform to be able to detect even those small uplifts with a large degree of confidence. So, as I said, if you want to grab the recording and slides from part 1 and part 2 of that deep dive into designing an effective SEO experimentation program, then use the bit.ly link or the QR code. But what I wanted to do is just kind of give you the high-level framework for what we've talked about today, which is how do we pull these pieces together, these 3 core strands, into turning organic search into a performance channel for e-commerce. So let's have a quick run through bringing it all together. The first thing is organic search is, for most retailers, the biggest channel, particularly for new customer acquisition, but it remains the biggest opportunity. There are some very exciting bits of technology going around the industry right now, but although they're fast growing, they're nascent, and the opportunity to add a percentage point or 2 of share of voice and search visibility can obliterate the size of a startup channel right now. I mean, obviously we're going to keep focus on this, and these very presentations might be about running experiments around inclusion in AI overviews or LLM search in the future. I anticipate a lot of the same techniques, but fundamentally right now, organic search, biggest channel, biggest opportunity, but least well understood. And that's no knock on anyone on this call or in your teams. And I say this with love as someone who has dedicated my professional life to organic search. It's a wonderful channel, but it's infuriating, and it is the least understood, both at a technical value driver, value levers level, but also at a business level. And that's what I'm kind of trying to change with this thinking, where I'm trying to think through what is it about paid media channels that makes them easy to invest in, makes them large and dominant for the kinds of organizations that we're talking about here, and how can we learn from that and emulate it. And so this is the idea of, okay, well, a performance channel is one where we have a model of how it works. We can prove the value of the channel and also the initiatives within that channel, and crucially, we can allocate more budget and expect to get greater results out of it. And so what we've talked about is that the model, as I've talked about, is these incremental changes that are beneficial, that get us ahead of our competition, that don't last forever, but that stack and accumulate and help us maintain our performance. That in the proof point, we want to have this dashboard that says, okay, here are the initiatives that we're doing, and here's how they're stacking up, and here's how they're working, and here are the winners, here are the losers, and here's what we've learned from that. And then, crucially, we talk about how to put more in and get more out. And that is about increasing the speed of testing, running more tests, running higher quality tests, investing in the quality of our hypotheses, and doing better statistical work to be able to learn more, learn faster, and get more of those winners. So I'm hoping that framework has made sense. I'm keen to answer any questions. You can add comments on LinkedIn or tweet at me. Quite easy to find on lots of different channels. But that's what we've covered today. That's what a performance channel is, and that's how we've built it out. And hopefully that gives you some sense of how to answer the question. Like, what would you do with that extra $1 million if your finance team came to you tomorrow and said, hey, 2025, we want to reallocate some more into SEO. Certainly that would be my answer if I was director or VP of SEO at large e-commerce retailer. If you want some more, and we're kind of coming up close to time just now, but if you want to get some more from SearchPilot's archive, then there's various things you can do. You can head to searchpilot.com, head into the use cases, and there's a retail tab which has lots of information specific to your industries. It talks about how SEO testing works in e-commerce and retail, as well as linking to a load of individual test results and case studies that reflect concerns that are directly relevant to e-commerce and retail. And if you want to get this stuff in your email, you can head to bit.ly/searchpilot-flight-log. I think it's searchpilot.com/flight-log as well. Anyway, and there's the QR code for that. If you want even more of a conversation, so if you'd like to speak to me or one of the team about building out an SEO experimentation program at your brand, then if you head to bit.ly/searchpilot-demo or use this QR code, you can book in time to speak to us. You might notice this little quote here from Marks & Spencer, which, as I say, anyone in the UK will recognise as one of Britain's biggest retailers. You can read more on our website about what we're doing with Marks & Spencer. I'm very excited about this, and there's going to be some quite cool results and customer story coming very soon. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining me on this. I'd love your feedback. You can email me. It's my first name last name @searchpilot.com, or Twitter. My DMs are open. LinkedIn, I'm very easy to find. And I look forward to doing more of these and hopefully continuing to tailor them to the things that are interesting to e-commerce and retail folks around the industry.